we've managed to get our calculator to work, but in this lesson, I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about the difference between printing something to the console over here versus returning something as an output from a function. Because a lot of students get very confused at this stage and they think, well, why don't I just print this result instead of returning it? What's the actual difference and why would I use return? That's what I want to address in this lesson. At the moment, we've got these 4 functions, and when we call it, we pass over some inputs, and then once we get hold of the output, we go ahead and print it out into the console. Now, in the current state of the calculator, it's hard to see the difference between the print and the return. But here's a question. What if we wanted to take the output that comes from calling this function, and instead of just storing it inside a variable and then printing it out, what if we wanted to pass it as an input to another function? Let's say that at this point, we decided, you know what, we're going to ask them to pick another operation. And then let's ask them to pick another number. And finally, let's go ahead and get the calculation function again based on this new operation symbol that they picked. And then we're going to calculate the new answer. But this time, instead of passing over the calculation function, we're going to pass over the answer that we got back from this step. So num1 is now the previous answer, and the second number that's going to be the input is going to be num3. At this point, when we're calling this calculation function, we're passing over the result or output of this calculation function, and that is going in right here, and then the third number goes in as the second input. What basically has happened here is I've taken the output from this function. So in fact, I could replace this answer with this output, and I've taken that as the first input into the calculation function, and then num3 as the second input, and then I'm using all of this in order to get the answer. Let's call this first answer, and let's call this second answer, just to differentiate the two answers. And now I'm going to write a slightly different print statement. In this case, the calculation is done using the first answer, and then the operation symbol, and then the num3 that was inserted at this point in order to obtain the second answer. So now if we give this a run, let's do just 3 plus 2. Now this first step of the calculation, we get 5 as the result. So now if I want to pick another operation, let's say I want to multiply 5 by 3, then I'm going to take this 5, which is the previous answer, I'm going to say multiply, and then I'm going to provide the next number, which we'll call 3, and now it takes the previous answer from the last step and puts that in as the first number in the calculation, multiplies it by 3, in order to get the final answer. In this case, what I'm able to do, because I have an output from my calculation functions up here, because each of these all return their answer, I'm able to take the result from that calculation and plug it right back into another calculation function using the result of that function call as the input to another function call. And I'm only able to do this because I'm using the return statement and because I have outputs from my functions. This would not be possible if I was using a print statement. In the next lesson, we're going to reorganize our code and introduce a while loop so that we can continue making as many calculations as we want to.